It's wonderful to be with all of you again, focusing on this amazing material gifted to us by Emily Cady, Lessons in Truth. This Sunday, we're going to be focusing on the chapter in the book called Thinking. And it's such a powerful part of our awareness when we connect into the basic principles of unity and understand the principle that we often call the law of mind action. And I'm going to unpack a little bit of that today as we focus more specifically on this chapter, number 3 in the book, Lessons in Truth. One of the things that she talks about in the book is the nature of who we are, that we are spirit, soul, and body. Spirit, that absolute, ever-present divine nature, that is the essence of who we are. And soul, she talks about as the clothing of spirit. Not the clothing in the sense of the clothing that I'm putting on top of my body, but the clothing that comes around our divine spiritual nature. So spirit, soul, and body, physicality of who we are. When we're looking at this essence of thinking, we're looking at this soul nature, the clothing part of our human existence, spirit, soul, and body. I remember a teacher I had, my minister, Richard Manti, and we would talk about the idea that our soul, the soul essence of who we are, is pivotal. Would say our soul is pivotal. I think that may have been something that Charles Fillmore said. And it's a different way of understanding soul than many of us understand soul. So again, just as Emily Cady has said in chapter 1, put aside your previous understanding. Don't try to put new wineskins, these thoughts, these teachings, these ideas into an old framework, into old wineskins. Just look at this idea of soul in a different way with me today as we explore this chapter on thinking. Essentially what Emily Cady is saying here when she talks about spirit, soul, and body, and the idea that our soul is the clothing of our spirit. What she's talking about is that area of consciousness that we have that can be pivotal in our world. Pivotal in the sense that our consciousness, that awareness that we have through the mind that we carry, can pivot and either focus on the spiritual nature of who we are, or it can turn and pivot and focus on the physical nature, the body nature. So this idea that soul is pivotal is a key understanding when we're looking at how Emily Cady and how Charles Fillmore is supporting us in terms of our thinking nature and the way that we turn our attention and our awareness either toward things of the spirit, things that are eternal and of the very essence of who we are in our God life, our God essence, our God nature, or the way we can pivot our attention and turn it toward things of the senses, perhaps more of the physicality in the body, using the senses to define the world we live in and to literally create the world from this pivotal soul nature that we have, to turn toward the divine essence or to turn toward that which is of the senses and of the physical. So it's an important part of our awareness as we tune more deeply into the very essence of who we are as spiritual beings having a human body, because as part of our human body, the mind can be very attached and attracted to things in the outer. Charles Fillmore talked about this as mortal mind. Apparently Paul talked about it as mortal mind, carnal mind. And we can understand it very readily in our world today because we have such an attachment to the intellectual way of understanding things. Looking at facts, looking at what we might call reality, the outer world, we can look at the body and say, oh, it has the virus or it doesn't have the virus. There's tests that can prove that it's there or not there. And we have a tendency in our world to rely on that evidence of mortal mind or on evidence in the physical to tell us that that's the truth. And yet what we're being called into in these lessons in truth is our ability to look, instead of at the lower consciousness of the senses, we're being called through the power of soul and pivotal power of consciousness to look to the realm of the eternal in spirit. So some of the beautiful imagery that Emily Cady gives us to help us more deeply in this awareness is a beautiful image of a reservoir that is akin to connecting us with that spiritual essence of the divine, the God nature of who we are. She talks about this idea of a reservoir that has a channel, many different channels, and the channel comes out from the reservoir and there's a fountain that emerges at the end of that channel. And what she says is, each one of us are like this individual fountain that is emerging through the channel that comes out of the reservoir that's God. That each one of us is like this flowing energy that is carrying in and through us all that is of the nature of God, all love, all power, all strength, all spiritual wisdom, all creativity that comes out of this reservoir of God comes through this channel that's our own individual unique channel and fountains forth as who we are in the world. She talks about this fountaining as being such an important part of our life, and that this fountain has to always be flowing. It can't be stagnant. If at the end of this reservoir and the channel, it's just a stagnant pond full of limitation and algae that is not going to ever emerge and flow out, that it ultimately will die. It will become like the Dead Sea and die. That we have to be always tapped into and in this flow of the divine nature of who we are, giving forth the gifts that are ours uniquely to give in order to be vitally alive in the world. So I love that image. I just love that image. And I think that it's an important part of understanding the divine nature of who we are, because in a sense, what it does is it connects us, yes, to the outer, as in the flowing forth of the gifts that we've been given in the world, but always connecting us back into this larger reservoir, which is the connection of spirit. And how we do this is through the nature, the soul, the clothing of the body, that pivotal nature in consciousness, where we always have an opportunity to recharge our batteries, retune ourselves into the spiritual essence of who we are, moment to moment. We're called into this. It's pretty interesting in the book. She talks right in the beginning about how there are kind of two different people, either the people who have to learn everything and struggle through and understand it through the intellect, or those who have the capacity to become like little children and just be in the fullness of understanding and acceptance. You know, and Jesus always talked about that idea that, you know, that only those who can become like little children will experience the kingdom. And Emily Cady even is so bold as to say that we have to stop reading. She says, the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. it does make a great difference in our daily lives what we think about God, about ourselves, and about our neighbors. Henceforth, through ignorance of our real selves and of the results of our thinking, we've let our thoughts flow at random. Our minds have been tuned toward the external of our being, and nearly all our information has been gotten through our five senses. We've thought wrong because misinformed by these senses, and our troubles and sorrows are the results of our wrong thinking. But, says someone, I do not see how my thinking evil or wrong thoughts about God or about anyone can make me sick or my husband lose his job. Well, I will not just now try to explain all the steps by which bad results follow false thinking, but I will ask you to try thinking true, right thoughts a while and see the results that you get. She's not going to try to convince you through the intellect all the reasons why your thinking that has been focused on the external, why your pivotal thinking that's been focused on the loaves and fishes on the external is wrong, because that could take forever and ever and ever trying to convince you, because you'd been just looking at the intellect rather than being in that place of the wisdom of God. What she says is instead is take this thought, God loves me. Take this thought and think this thought over and over again. And she says, when you do this, and I really invite you to do this, to take the thought, God loves me. Take it even beyond just the thinking of it. Look at yourself in the mirror and say this to yourself, God loves me. Say it to yourself. Start out maybe with 7 times. Then move a little bit farther and say it 14 times. And then even farther, say it 21 times, looking at yourself in the mirror. And begin to see what happens for you as you say, God loves me. And really begin to own it and to feel it. You'll feel this incredible sense of joy and exhilaration in your body. She says, even what will start happening is the circulation in your body will improve, the digestion in your body will improve. All of this because you're tuned into a truth about who you are, about your divine nature, rather than whatever false idea you might have about who you are, about your body, about your health, about your relationships. When we can start tuning our thinking into the higher realms of truth rather than the field of the senses that has far too much to talk about most of the time, we'll find it literally starts shifting the way our body responds. This is the power of tuning into higher consciousness. And it's really interesting because she talks about this idea that people think that if God really loved us, God would just make everything work for us all the time. Why would there ever be challenges? Why would there be difficulty in our life? If God really loved me, God would just set it out for me to have the perfect life. I'd have perfect body. I'd have all the health I need. I'd have all my relationships would be wonderful. I'd feel loved and I'd be able to give love to my partner, to my children. I'd have all I need. I'd have all the resources in my mind to do the things that I want to do in my life. If God really loved me, God would just have already done that for me. But she has this really great response to this thought that many of us have, which is, as a parent, you're not going to do everything for your child. Your child would never learn if you did everything for your child. You allow your child to learn in your child's own time how to walk, how to relate. You're a guide, yes, but you don't do it for your child. And she said, this is the same relationship that God has with us. Always there as a support, but allowing us to take the steps that are ours to take in the world, to learn the things that are ours to learn in the world. Because we have this capacity. We're not, she says, automatons. We're not God's robots in the world. And part of what happens for us is we have lessons that are ours to learn, and uniquely ours. My lessons are different than your lessons. Always with the available presence and power of God, the wisdom that is there in that reservoir channeling out to us when we're willing to be present every moment to all the love that is there for us, all the power that is there for us, all the wisdom that is there for us. But sometimes we learn by, the failures that we have in our life, the mistakes that we make. And this is part of how the divine works in and through each one of us, strengthening us, growing us. So what is it for you? What is it for you in your life right now, where you may have focused a little bit too much on the outer? Maybe you're telling yourself some stories about who you are and what you're allowed to have or who you're allowed to be. Has this time that we've been going through, shelter in place, given you an opportunity to turn your soul power and your consciousness to the higher realms of spirit and to really believe and know that God loves you and that you are one with the powerful presence of God? Or have you been turning your attention more to the senses, to the lower realms of awareness that have called forth a sense of fear or despair, a sense of hopelessness, or a sense of loneliness, depression? This is where our teachings in unity are so powerful, because they remind us that in every moment, the thoughts that we think about bring about the world that we're living in, and that we have an opportunity to turn our attention to the mind and the presence of God, that Christ mind, that Christ presence. Your body, mind, and spirit, your spirit, soul, and body. The mind is soul, is pivotal. Where's your consciousness? Where are you gathering momentum in your life? Where are you calling forth the highest and the best of who you are, moment to moment, by holding the high watch in your mind and heart? Let your thinking be on this, that God loves you. Hold that in your heart this week. Take time to look at yourself in the mirror and repeat those precious words. God loves me. For you are a child of the divine, and you inherit all the qualities of the divine, all the God qualities. You are love, you are power, you are strength, you are faith, you are wisdom and creativity. Allow your fountain to flow forth in the world with the gifts that God gives you moment to moment. May you feel the blessing and the grace of being a child of God. Sending you love and blessings.